Hi there. Welcome to the Humans of AI podcast, where we speak with enterprise leaders on what kind of outcomes they are seeing inside enterprises with AI. Today, I'm delighted to have with us Andre. Andre is the head of orchestration strategy at Zapier. Before Zapier, Andre was a 3x startup founder and successfully exited all three times, first to Infonex, then sold the second company to Yahoo, and then joined Zapier with his third startup. Andre was also the vice president product at Yahoo. Before we start, maybe it's worthwhile calling out that there are different forms of AI we are all familiar with. We are probably most familiar with AI as a chatbot model. If you're an engineer, you're probably familiar with AI as a coding assistant. You're also probably familiar with AI inside some of the features that you use in SaaS products. But a lot of, Andre, your experience has been AI inside business automation or business workflows. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And to kick things off, Andre, it would be really helpful to understand, given that you're so close to AI usage inside enterprise workflows, what would you say are some popular misconceptions about how companies actually put AI into work inside their workflows?
Binny, if you're spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, you are probably walking away with the impression that every company is AI native. And those companies are building workflows that are fully agentic, end to end with AI. That is a misconception. These things look a lot less like magic and a lot more like plumbing. And in particular, AI is not being used at every step along the way. It's being used selectively in the places where it actually adds real value. And the other steps in these long, complex automations are actually traditional software. So think code, think business logic, essentially if-then statements. There's a couple of reasons why we find that companies land on this particular architecture. The first is that it is less expensive. So we have found that when you deploy AI selectively, only where you actually need it, as opposed to having it at every step in an automated workflow, the cost is about 70% less. The second reason why companies use this architecture is reliability. We don't know with certainty what an AI step is going to do every single time, just like we don't know how a person is going to behave in any given situation. But we do with code and business logic. We know exactly what it is going to do each time. And so in general, what we're finding is that companies are using AI steps where intelligence is required, and they're using traditional software where reliability is required.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Andre. Even in some of the experiences that we have had across engagements, what we have noticed is that the most successful ones are ones where someone has actually taken a step back and said, these are the 2 areas of the 10 possible areas inside the function that AI can do very well. And we use AI only there, as against kind of slapping AI on top of the entire workflow and then being surprised at the end of it that it wasn't performing as expected.
Exactly.
Yeah. And inside a company, there is a difference between an AI that helps a person, like a co-pilot or assistant, and an AI that's actually making decisions and making calls that future steps rely on. Could you maybe kind of talk about the difference between these 2 different kinds of AI or agents?
Sure. So really what you're describing is this continuum from assistance to autonomy. Let me give a concrete example that I think will illustrate your question, let's take a customer support team. A traditional automation, so no AI involved, might be extracting the email of the user that sent a customer support email, and then placing that email into a system of records such as a CRM, so that the team is able to track that that particular user has made a support request. So far, no AI involved. Now enter AI. AI can summarize the content of that support email. So that's going to assist a person from having to scan or read the entire email just to do an initial triage. For example, to know this is the kind of ticket that needs to immediately be escalated to a different support team, or this is the kind of ticket where what we need to do is follow up with the sender and ask for additional information to be clarified, or send the email to a different team to investigate further. Now, if we move one increment further on that continuum, AI can make that recommendation of this is a type 1 or type 2 or type 3 situation. And then if we move even additionally further along that continuum, AI can be making that decision, meaning before a person ever interacts with that email at all, an AI step is deciding immediate escalation, automated follow-up with the user to get more information, immediate dispatch to another team to do more research. And that really is the real inflection point where AI stops informing the decision and it starts making the decision.
And as you go down this continuum of AI as a co-pilot where it's informing you and assisting you towards more mission critical, it's actually doing the work. And given your experience running large teams of humans and managing billion-dollar P&Ls, how do you think humans evolve around that trust continuum of trusting the AI with incremental amounts of responsibility? Like, how does that change management kind of thought process happen inside a company?
This is a real gap right now in the market, Binny. And the way we've been approaching it as an industry with small scale pilots and scaled up pilots is perfectly fine for building trust. And as the models get better, seemingly every month in increments, more of that trust is being earned. But ultimately, if AI in a step is going to perform the work that a person used to perform, then there needs to be, and this is in industry parlance terms, governance. But really what we are talking about is the system of rules and policies that give us confidence that the AI is behaving in the right way, in the right manner, and we can observe and guardrail the behavior of the AI. And that ultimately is what needs to evolve alongside of the capabilities of the AI itself.
And one of the questions I had for you was, in this new world we are in, what should vendors, kind of who sell into large enterprises, what should they understand when they kind of sell into these companies? But before that question, I was curious, Andre, as a team or a employee goes through this continuum of self-help, chatbot towards workflow kind of stuff, how do companies usually decide saying, this we will build ourselves, this we will get an external partner to build, for this we'll use a no-code, low-code tool? How are those decisions usually made?
A lot of companies are wrestling with that very question right now, and it used to be in an era when the cost to develop software was high, and therefore the cost to customize that software was correspondingly high. The default decision would be packaged software. So effectively, what we're talking about are generic workflows that could be customized to some limited extent out of the box, and then professional services to get you the rest of the way there. That equation is changing in front of our very eyes, Binny, because increasingly it is possible for companies to use building blocks to create their own workflows. And the category of SaaS that makes that possible, that I am bullish on, is the category that is building the tools and capabilities to allow companies to create exactly what they need by way of these workflows. And that's a shift that we're seeing, and that's a shift that I believe will accelerate.
And in that kind of shift, enterprise, going to my original question, which is vendors trying to sell into these companies, what should they be cognizant of, and how do they affect real change inside these companies?
In my experience, real change usually comes down to three variables. About 1/3 the people involved, 1/3 the process, and 1/3 the technology. Now that last category is the one that gets the most airtime. It's really fun to talk about. Change is happening constantly, and so there's a lot there. But the reality is that success or failure is usually going to be found, in my experience, in one of those first two variables. And so let's talk for a little bit about the people side of the equation. Classically, as a vendor, you think about two constituencies within that enterprise. You have your enthusiasts and you have your skeptics. And enthusiasts are great. Your champions come from there, the allies that really help catalyze change, and they provide the energy that it takes to make something happen. In the conventional wisdom, your skeptics are the people that you eventually have to figure out a way to work around if you want to make change happen. I think that the conventional wisdom is wrong. I think the skeptics are not the people that you work around. I think these are the people you work with and you work through, especially when we're talking about AI-enabled change, where it's really important to understand the nuance, to understand the edge cases, and to understand what the failure modes look like. Well, these are the very things that skeptics tend to know a lot about, because it's reflective of their experience and their deep domain expertise in that area or that process. And in my experience, skeptics are not people that are resistant to change. They are resistant to change that is done in a sloppy way.
Makes sense. And also change for just the sake of change, rather than an outcome-driven kind of change, in a way. Yeah. And you earlier made a point about the SaaS, the world of SaaS software existed because it was expensive to build kind of bespoke software. And now with the prevalence of reusable building blocks, that is going to become more and more common. And so is that going to lead to an explosion of internal self-built tooling? Do you think that'll coexist with the SaaS? Or do you think a lot of the SaaS functionality will be rebuilt internally, but in a very niche way with internal tooling?
Binny, that is certainly the million-dollar question that you've asked, or maybe we should call it the trillion-dollar question, given what we saw happen with the NASDAQ a few months ago after the SaaSageddon memo was published. And it is the number one question right now in enterprise software. I think there are basically two camps, like there are on any really interesting question. You've got the business as usual camp and the AI changes everything camp, and that's a little bit of a caricature. But I think the reality lies somewhere in between. I think that's where the really interesting texture is to be found, and that's where I myself am situated. If I were going to describe it in a little more color, I would say that the systems of record, these are the companies that have spent the last 1 to 2 decades building their moats around authoritative and canonical data. I'm more bullish on them. For AI to work well, AI needs exactly that. It needs the authoritative data. It needs the canonical data. As we talked about earlier, for the companies that have basically built generic workflows and packaged them, I'm a lot more bearish on those companies, because the ability for other companies to replace that at both a lower cost and a higher degree of customization is rapidly increasing.
And you yourself, and your team at Zapier have some major research being published in a couple of weeks. Without kind of scooping yourself, could you maybe talk a little bit about what we should be expecting to hear?
Sure, Benny. Think about it as moving from anecdote to evidence. There's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions right now, and there's a lot of speculation around what is really happening inside larger companies in their workflows with AI. When I joined Zapier, we set out to answer that very question, not by surveying leaders, but by directly observing what is happening in workflows. And over this period of time, we have invested a lot of resources in the identification and anonymization and aggregation of that data in order to understand exactly how companies are using AI in workflows. And in the research that we are publishing later this month, we are showing exactly how AI is being used, what are the roles that it plays in company workflows, what tends to be the order in which companies adopt and deploy these workflows, what are their characteristics, and why does it matter? What are the practical implications of this, particularly as it ties back to something we discussed earlier, which is governance of AI in the enterprise.
Interesting. Can't wait to get my hands on that report when it comes out. In this changing scenario, Andre, what guidance would you have for fresh college graduates coming out into the workforce?
This is a question that is near and dear to my heart, I would say, and I've over the years counseled a number of people that are grappling with these sorts of decisions, both early in career and mid-career changes and pivots. And my advice usually comes down to two things. One is networking, and two is do your homework. I'll say a little bit about each one. On networking, frequently people think about networking in the context of needing help. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that approach. However, I think it is incomplete. I think done well, the right mental model around networking is that it shouldn't be episodic and only when you need help. It really should be continuous. And most of the time, it should be about you giving help, being the kind of person that shares advice and expertise and learnings with other people, the kind of person that helps others by making introductions to other people. I think that's really the way that networking becomes part of a virtuous circle. On the do your homework part, this is the area where I think my advice is really starting to change. So it used to be that if you were interested in a particular company or market, doing your homework would mean two things. It would mean doing informational interviews with people that are already inside that company or that industry. And it would mean doing public research, getting your hands on anything that you could read about where things are today and where the trends are going. And you couple this knowledge from the inside and this knowledge from the outside, and it means you've really done your research. And that helps you on both your outreach and it helps you in the interview process. Binny, I think that is now minimum bar. I think that candidates increasingly are going to show their interest in companies not just by researching them, but by building for them. And what that could look like is the weekend before an interview, you AI code a solution to a problem that you have identified through the informational interviewing that you did. And yes, networking helped play a role there. It fed into your understanding of the kinds of problems that they have specifically, or that you can reasonably infer that the team that you are talking to may have based on your conversations with them or based on your conversations with companies like them. And so seen through that light, the interview becomes less about describe your capabilities and much more about describe what you have already done and demonstrated.
Yeah, that's very, very tangible advice, which is the networking should focus on give versus take. And the homework is no more about do I have the information? It's about what have I done that I can talk about in the interview. Yeah,
exactly.
Super helpful. Andre, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. It was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Denny. A pleasure being on the show.